Are we expecting Maureen?
No, Maureen
No.
couldn't make it today. I think she was scheduled to be in court. Okay. Call to order this regular meeting of the Easton Reading Region 9 Joint Boards of Education Policy Committee at 9:05 a.m. on February 5th, 2021. Our second item of business is the approval of minutes from the January 29th, 2021 ER9 Boards of Education Policy Committee regular meeting.
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Chris. Thank you, Gwen. Any discussion? Okay, very good. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Passes 3-0. Takes us to our next item, which is public comment. There we go. I see Allison is raising her hand. Asked to unmute. Okay, you should be able to unmute now, Allison.
Yes. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good. Good morning. Yes, we can.
I was actually waiting for your email that this
actually,
was still on.
You're actually cutting out a little bit.
Okay. Is this any better?
It still sounds sort of tin canny. Maybe if you have a headset on, maybe the microphone's not.
No. This is
Okay.
my laptop. In a few minutes, it'll shake itself out. And also my internet provider that
Yeah.
I've actually had a lot of issues with.
It's actually seems to be getting better now. So
Okay. Yep.
Go ahead. Thank you.
It's like getting up in the morning when you're older.
Right. Just got to stretch out a little bit.
Yeah, except mine lasts all day. But anyway, I want to read something if I can find it here. I've struggled for weeks on whether to speak out or not on the subject of the superintendent's post on social media. I'm saddened I had to think twice about speaking to all of you. It's terrible that our country, our state, and this town is so divided that speaking out when it might not be what the majority believes is dangerous both socially and career-wise. Well, I thought, I thought, how would that look to our daughter? What would that teacher and what would it say about the way my parents raised me? I have pieced together what I know from several different town meetings, not from social media, not from rumors. I've also reached out directly to Dr. Harrison as I wanted to hear his facts and have a conversation. But to date, he's replied only once with a time and date that was not convenient. And I have reached out since 3 additional times via email and one with with a phone call, just in case my emails didn't reach him. To date, I've not received any reply back, and it's been a full week now. It is my strong recommendation that the Easton Board of Ed or others, Reading, ER9, whatever you want to loop in here, send a listserv to the entire school community, including all the facts that are known about the post, about the way the post was obtained, as well as details regarding all discussions and meetings the Board of Ed has held in respect to this event. They should also include the steps they're taking, including policies going forward. I suggest a town hall regarding this matter be held. I have many unanswered questions. One point that I play over and over in my head that disturbs me the most is one that Mr. Stinson made at a Board of Ed meeting. He stated, I'm paraphrasing here, I did listen to the recording, I waited till it came out. He stated a Norwalk man saw the Channel 12 segment and was upset and shared the post. So I ask, are the police involved, other authorities? What is this person capable of? And how does this affect the students, one of which is my daughter, and what kind of danger is she in? Well, I promote free speech. I also believe in people in certain professions and certain positions must be held to a higher level. What kind of precedence does this set for our young people? A lack of policy should not be a defense. Do the contents of the post align with what SSES and Helen Keller instill in their students? An inclusive, loving, caring, and welcoming environment to all. Again, I'm only asking that all the facts be shared with the entire school community. I'm asking for full transparency at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. No other members of the public being present. We'll move to board member or committee member comment. Okay, hearing none, we'll move to our next agenda item, which is discussion and possible action. First item, Go Guardian and action plan related thereto. I have the action plan. Sorry. And I will share my screen here. Okay. So last we met, we sort of put together a set of to-dos, and one of the sort of vitally important parts of this is actually due dates for these things. So we should endeavor to get due dates on these items. One of the so we had 2 pages here. I'm sorry, one for sort of specifically Go Guardian, one for cross-committee communication, and one for enumerated duties. So specific to Go Guardian, I think, Dr. Pearson, you had a number of items, and I don't know if you were able to get to any of these in the last week, or if the relatively insane schedule of board meetings and budget presentations has probably taken the majority of your time.
Well, I can report that I have started every one of these tasks, but I don't have, none of them have even been completed. In fact, even those that seemed simple in nature were in fact not quite as simple to execute. So I can say that all of those tasks are in process, and I'm optimistic that by our next meeting, I will be able to provide an update to the committee.
Okay. I'm going to just add a sort of target date here for some of these guys, just to help us. Would you say there are items that you think are sort of more reasonable to expect sooner than others?
I would say that I should have an update for the first task.
Okay.
The second task is a little bit more involved because it's actually not a contract, it's an order, and I'm working with our IT team to discriminate the different levels of Go Guardian versions that we have had over the last 3 years.
Okay.
I would say that by 2/12, I should have an update for the committee regarding 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
I've had so skipping down to the next one, the subject matter experts. So working with my assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction network, I've heard back from fewer than half of those in my position, in some cases to give me qualitative information, and then in other cases just pointing me to the right contact that then requires another follow-up. So I might not have a full update by next week for that item. Probably
Okay.
safer to say the week after.
Okay. Well, let's see, is that 219? Yeah. And then right, comparisons and things like that, maybe beyond that, maybe the 26th as a penciled in, or March 5th.
I think that's it. I think the 26th is fair for a pencil in.
Yeah. And I would say all of these, very few of these things do we have things sort of stacked on top of, at this point.
I believe Maureen circulated to the committee her findings with respect to this item yesterday, with an intent that she could share her process next week.
Yep, sounds good. Okay. I did some work in the sort of tech and privacy space policies that exist, whether they're in sort of CABES, or I've also looked at some of the other districts, but I think there's no sort of formal presentation. I'll look to have that sort of gathered into a couple of slides for next week. All right. Any other action items that we want to add, or anything else that we want to discuss related to the Go Guardian action planning and next steps?
I guess a comment would be, if there is any intent that it would be the committee's recommendation that we take any steps that would either limit our use of the product or move away from the product entirely, given our sort of global concerns about it that have been articulated over the past couple of weeks, that has a theoretical budget implication with respect to the cost incurred by all three districts to deploy this software and any alternative, because I don't think we're going to go sort of naked without some kind of software in place to have monitoring and protection. We just need to make sure that it complies with an appropriate level of policy and control.
Yeah.
The small amount of information that so just as a reminder to the full group that we have already limited our use of the product. So we are using the filtering. There is a log to that filtering. So some, could say that you are indeed monitoring because there's a log to the filtering capacity, but we disabled the monitoring component when there are any students who are learning remotely. So we're not using that function of the product right now. There are some districts that use the iBoss version to do the exact same thing that we're trying to do with Go Guardian. Mm-hmm. iBoss is a product connected to CEN, which is the state tool to provide filtering, and iBoss is sort of a higher level of that, similar again to what we're doing with Go Guardian. iBoss is the product that earlier, I was going to say this month, but it was probably in late January that was affected, and statewide that it was basically non-functional. I mean, it created, general havoc with many, many districts across the state.
Okay. All right. Good. Anything else on Go Guardian or action plan related there too? Okay. On the 3000 series, sort of next item, 3000 series, I think related to this is work to bring in sort of cross-committee communication. So I've reached out to the Easton representatives from the Food Services Committee and Transportation Committee, asked for their help in convening those two committees so that we can bring to them our sort of the policies that we've uncovered specifically in the 3000 series related to food services and transportation. For food services, there's an ask. For transportation, there's an ask for us to just summarize those items. So I'm going to pull together those items and send them over so that they sort of know why they're convening. And then I think what we discussed was that I would go to that committee and sort of present those questions. Do we, just sort of revisiting that question, does it make sense for other members of the policy committee to attend those sessions so that we're able to get into a sort of discussion on the topics? Or do we need to sort of have a wall between those conversations?
I think if the point is to solicit feedback with respect to the operational impacts of the policies, then we don't need to meet all together to have that conversation. Mm-hmm. It can just be, advise me on what you want or what your thoughts are. I will bring that back to the committee and we'll draft accordingly. I don't have a problem either way. I mean, Gwen and I are on the transportation committee, so
I was just going to say that.
Regardless,
there's a lot of crossover.
The conversation's really about food service.
There you go. All right.
But I would be inclined to attend if anybody thought that was helpful, and if we held it in a joint manner, then we could do the drafting in real time while we have that conversation too.
Okay.
I wouldn't hold up their meeting to do that. Yep. But if it was convenient, we could cross-post it all the same.
Right. Okay. And there was on the food services, there was a question about contract coming up as well. And if they're getting together to discuss that contract, then perhaps we can be on the agenda for that. But I don't think they have anything scheduled as of now. All right.
And is Jeff the chair of that committee?
I don't know if he's currently the chair of that committee. He sits on that committee. I was
sort of a long timer on that committee. So
I was actually looking for sort of information about who the chairs were, because I wasn't going to reach out to the members of my board unless they were the chairs. But I would. That's how I discovered that the website was down yesterday. Is like, who are the actual chairs of these committees?
Jeff was the chair at one point.
Okay. All
Certainly, when we did our last full review of food service vendors, and ultimately decided to stay with Chartwell's.
He's always struck me as the person who sort of leads those conversations. And
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. Any other items before we leave the 3000 series and tri-board governance structure? Do we want to dive in on that topic at all right now?
So I guess the first question is on the 3000s. We've talked about getting the enumerated duties document kind of together before we move any further.
That's right.
I don't know how we want to work forward with that. We've also talked about holding a longer evening meeting to do some more sort of nuts and bolts work on all of these things.
Yep.
Do we want to start talking about scheduling a cleanup meeting?
Yes, please.
And just, I think what probably makes sense.
You went on mute, Chris. Sorry. You said what probably
Yeah,
makes
I was holding the microphone open and then I opened my calendar and it took it off.
Okay.
So you guys in Easton are planning to finalize a budget vote on the 11th?
That's
the goal. That's the aspirational goal.
Our aspirational goal is to finalize budget next
So
week.
what I'm thinking is, if really by the week of March 1st, Reading will be done also, maybe we're looking into the weeks of March 8th, 15th, and 22nd in sort of I would call it the quiet period.
Yeah.
Between when the boards finish their budget work and before the boards of finance weigh in and sort of send it back.
Good. Okay. I like that.
If we target sometime in there,
I'm adding to the enumerated duties to-do list to schedule a working session. And we're saying between March 8th, not 3/8, and
probably the 19th, like in those 2 weeks.
Yep. Good. Very good.
My guess is that the Reading public hearing is the 18th, but I haven't looked at the calendar.
Okay. And I'll look to get that scheduled by the 19th. So in the next couple of weeks, I'll make sure that we get that scheduled. But in the meantime, creating the template that we'll use for the enumerated duties. I think actually I already created that. So it's waiting for us to do some of that work in there. And we also have cleanup work that I wouldn't say is necessarily directly connected to the enumerated duties document, that it's just sort of general to-dos that we've assigned and that we need to sort of check on the follow-up on and make sure that we have that sort of full list or project plan.
And to be clear, I would conceive of the work session as not requiring Stephanie.
Yeah.
It would just be us doing some really gritty kind of granular work on document formatting. That might result in a side list of questions, but I don't think we need administration to dedicate another evening to.
Yep. Agreed. One of the things that we talked about that I don't think ended up on any to-do list was the idea of interns. I actually don't remember where we bottomed out on that. Was that something that Stephanie was looking at through your sources, or were we looking at through our sources?
I feel like it was shared. I feel like I was going to, and I will say I've done nothing on this from last week to now, that I was going to reach out to the institutions that we use for education interns, and that maybe one of you was going to reach out to see if there were other. I don't know.
Yep.
I think it might have been Maureen. Let's say it was Maureen.
But
But I actually think it may have been.
Paralegal
That's how
was
my
not
meetings
the
work
right,
at
was
work.
not the right fit,
Yeah.
right? She said a paralegal wasn't the right fit, but there
I
was
think that's
another.
she had an idea. Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's right.
And we can memorialize that in the minutes in her absence.
I'm going to put in
Public
maybe-
policy. I just went back to
Yeah,
my notes.
that's
He's a public policy master's student.
research intern okay, and I'll put that for Maureen. And I'm just creating another sheet. So we have a Go Guardian sheet, a cross committee communication, enumerated duties, and then this will be our sort of working group and internship to-dos. Okay, good. All right, good. Anything else before we leave the 3000 series and governance structure questions?
In the same sort of project planning, timelining perspective, I think that we should set ourselves a goal of having some sort of tri-board governance work bottomed out before the regular May tri-board meeting.
Okay.
I think that the absence of that framework has already caused issues in the past 10 days, and resolving that is going to be helpful. From the some process is better than no process perspective.
Right.
Even if the process is not perfect.
In order for that to happen, are we thinking that that's a job of the policy committee to come up with some reasonable process that we would propose to our respective boards?
I think that what probably makes sense is to develop a broad-based framework. Call it an MOU, call it a joint policy, call it a regulation, call it whatever you want, that defines the relationship between the three boards in a way that everybody can get behind. And I think when we are in the process of having that discussion here, I think it would be also helpful to give clearer notice to all board members that we're having that discussion, so that if they would like to have their input had, they can come to this meeting or advise you with respect to their input on that. So that when we do get to recommending something, we're not relitigating every single sentence at that point, because we might as well just have a 7-hour meeting to write it together at that point.
Agreed. I wonder if we were scheduling a working session, I wonder about the availability and
maybe that's an evening meeting.
exactly.
Maybe that's a 7 o'clock on a Monday. The policy committee intends to have a conversation about an operating agreement between the three boards, basically, and what the reasonable expectations are. And come one, come all, basically.
Yep. Okay. And I would guess we'd want to put that in the same gap.
Probably. Yeah, I think that gets back, John, to a side conversation that we've been having about sort of an annual planner,
Right.
And where these gaps exist to do kind of
This kind of work.
quote unquote the work that
Right.
falls outside of the other crunches. So
Right. Okay. Good. Okay. I think that was very helpful. Any other? Okay, so we have C, other policy items that from time to time may be of issue or time sensitive. I don't think we have any of that at this point. Although Title IX.
I was going to say we should have a conversation about Title IX.
We left that. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
It was in the news this week, obviously, with Commissioner Cardona's confirmation hearings. The advice has been that we should adopt the
Right.
revised policy basically as soon as possible. And so my question would be whether or not this committee should be reviewing either the CABE or shipment model policy and making a recommendation back to the boards to go
Mhm.
with it, because short of scheduling a special meeting now,
Right.
Reading is looking at April before
Right.
they can get this on the books,
Right.
which is starting to get a little bit problematic.
Right. We could do a
More problematic.
right. I mean, we have
If we recommended something today, Easton could adopt it by Thursday.
that's right. We had language already on this. I think we had talked about this several months ago.
Yeah, and you more recently got the Shipman and Goodwin
Right.
recommended versions.
That's right. Okay. I'm going to see if I can pull that up quickly. If anyone else has that Shipman and Goodwin language. I don't believe I received that directly from Shipman.
You didn't. Chris, you have it, and I can pull it up as well.
Where is it? Here we go. Model policy, personnel and students. It looks like
Yes.
there's two. If you'd like, John, I've got the personnel policy I can share.
Please feel free.
Okay, so now you should see the Shipman and Goodwin Series 4000 recommendation with respect to sex discrimination and sexual harassment in the workplace for personnel.
Is there a line on the right above? Yep.
Yep.
Thank you. Is there anything below that on the right? Okay.
Then it just continues.
Okay.
Because Does anything on here concern you, Stephanie? From an operations
There's nothing
perspective?
that's concerning. I was looking specifically for the areas where there is some choice. So it has to do with the threshold of determining findings of fact, which doesn't appear to be in this policy. So
Because then
the only
there's
thing
regulations that come with it too.
Okay. So the only thing that I would say in terms of the roles, obviously I want to identify a role, not a name on the page that we were just on. And it's the assistant principals, the supervisors in special education, as well as the ER9 Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. So those are the people who have the title of coordinator. I'm the district level coordinator, which is a little bit different. But we all have that title.
So the Title IX coordinators
Yeah.
are the
assistant principals in each school building, and however you want to name that, as well as the supervisors, the Easton and Reading supervisors in special education.
who is it in Region 9?
It's the assistant principals.
Because there is no supervisor, there's just director.
Right, there's a DC who has not gone through this training.
Okay, so all 6 APs plus the 2 supervisors plus you.
4, 5, yes, 6 APs plus the 2 supervisors plus me.
Do we have any concerns about using this language broadly, even though it doesn't totally work for Eastern Reading Region 9? Do we want to adopt these with more precision? John, Gwen?
I think it's fine to use the broader terms.
Right, because this is true for all districts. There just isn't a supervisor in Region 9, so it just sort of falls off.
Right.
Should our director be getting that training? Or are we good with, since we've got the 2 APs?
The APs are the ones who really have the official designation. So, our athletic director is also obviously very in tune with
Sure.
the latest regulations, but that person doesn't serve as the official coordinator.
So for this next,
Honestly, the new regulations require us to provide much more comprehensive training. And so I imagine that more people in leadership positions will have this training. So if you can see that we shall provide training to, and it's a pretty long list of people here.
now, are we correct that we're naming this right, that all these people are the Title IX coordinators? And then in the next sentence, it's looking for the contact information for the coordinator. Do we want to then say that anybody can report it directly to any Title IX coordinator?
At the school,
Or do we wanna-
otherwise you would have central office be the mailing address.
Right. It says the following points of contact. So are we putting all school addresses and telephone numbers? Do we have an email address like title9@er9.org? Or should we?
You could.
Because if we created title9@er9.org and then it just was a distribution group to the people who were the Title IX coordinators, it would solve for some of these problems.
Right, you don't have to have somebody's email address in the policy.
But
Right.
if part of your problem is with one of the Title IX coordinators, you may want to specifically target.
Yeah,
It means that you're sharing information much more broadly if you're sending it to every single person who has that designation.
Right.
right.
I mean, we just need to add all the names, right? Like we just have a block.
Right.
for everybody.
Right. It's
Can the policy refer to email addresses are posted on each building's website or something like that? They would be posted and they would always be current, but we don't have somebody's name specifically in our policy because inevitably that person, somebody will
Right.
move on in a couple of years and the policy will not get updated. And
right. Somebody could leave tomorrow and then we have to go through 2 votes on a policy to
Right.
update the names.
Right.
It's kind of goofy.
I think it could list where the information is on the website.
Yeah.
Certainly for the email. For the mailing address could, like Stephanie said, could be central office.
My concern is that the regulations here are so wonky and particular
Yeah.
that it's possible that the federal regulations say the policy needs to say who the people are and give their contact information, because the people writing those regulations aren't thinking about the many hoops we have to jump through to make the policy work.
Right.
And I just, to the extent we want to be compliant with the policy, I would, before saying just look at the website, I'd want to go back to council and make sure that that's not creating an unintended consequence.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, so alternatively, if you're looking for an email contact, we could create that Title IX email contact and have it feed only into my email box. And then I could then distribute to, those that would be directly involved.
Right. I mean, you could say that the email is title9@eo9.org. And if you have a concern about the Title IX coordinators, call central office and talk to somebody. But
that almost sounds as if it's going through the grievance process, and the whole grievance process is outlined pretty clearly in the regulation.
Right, but it could be less than a grievance, right? It could be just a question that, hey, does this sound right to you, or something like that. And especially if the person who, if there's been some activity that you have questions about that's been perpetrated by one of the contacts, you'd want to be able to have some other path for asking that question.
Right, and so there are also a minimum of 2 coordinators per district, but there are more. So there are 4 in Easton, there are 4 in Reading, and there are 2 in Region 9. So there's always a second contact for each district.
Let me ask John, is it important to you that we pass something along to you that you can start working through the process next week?
I mean, we have plenty on our plate. I would sort of ask back, do you think that we are in a bad place, for not having this approved? I mean, I we could just put the stuff that Easton has today and live with the fact that that's relatively brittle for now to get compliant, and then along the, later come up with a better plan for making this evergreen.
I mean, what we could do is we could recommend this policy subject to clarification on how to list the contact information by council. I don't think the rest of it is particularly controversial. It's bread and butter.
Right.
And even if we don't have clarity on that between now and Tuesday, you can first read it on Tuesday and get the clarification. Even if it's not Thursday, by the time you get around to March, you've got it teed up for a second.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I like that approach.
Now, in addition to this, there are no less than 20 pages of regulations.
Right. But not our bag of the responsibilities to look at the regulations. So
I think then the
policy only.
The action from the board would be to adopt the policy and direct the administration to enact appropriate regulations.
Right.
Which will be some variety of this that is compliant with law. Right. So then what I would do is move that the ER9 policy committee recommends that all 3 boards adopt the Shipman and Goodwin model policy regarding prohibition of sex discrimination and sexual harassment in the workplace, parentheses, personnel, subject to clarification by council as to the enumeration of contact information.
Do I have a second? Thank you, Gwen. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. 3-0. Passed unanimously.
Which brings us to
the student version.
The other one. So here is the policy with respect to students, which is going to look awfully similar And then this is regulations also. This is just shorter.
Yep. Must have occurred within the United States of America. So if there's do we do field trips? I mean, we certainly don't K through 8, so I don't care. Sorry, Region 9.
Yeah, we
Do you do
occasionally
field trips that
send
are
some kids to France
Yeah.
Yeah.
or
Canada,
Canada.
that's strange
Canada and
that
France.
that somehow they would
Just Canada and France, though.
Yeah, let's just name those two countries.
Right. I'm confused about why, if they're on a class trip, then why wouldn't this be attached to that? But okay.
Yes, agree that it's odd. That
Yep.
certainly conduct would still be our responsibility.
Right. Like you don't get to take a yacht and park it in international waters and do whatever you want.
Well, I think that what it's saying is that under the law, for it to violate Title IX, it must have occurred within the United States, which is different than saying that we are not going to take it seriously if it took place outside the United States. But as a statement of the law, Title IX only applies to domestic conduct.
But we wouldn't be prohibited from sort of disciplinary action.
No,
Right.
Right.
We could
different
expand
discipline.
upon that and say that we are going to apply a certain expectation to conduct outside of.
Right. So the action might look identical to the action that we would take under Title IX. It just wouldn't be called Title IX.
And that's the last sentence of that paragraph. Conduct that doesn't meet these requirements may still be a violation of law or board policy.
Yep. Okay.
So I would make the same motion with respect to this policy as the last one, which is that the committee recommends to the 3 individual boards the adoption of the Series 5000 proposed Shipman and Goodwin policy regarding Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972, prohibition of sex discrimination and sexual harassment, parentheses, students, subject to clarification with counsel regarding the articulation of contact information for Title IX coordinators.
Second.
Thank you, Gwen. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. 3-0.
And just as a takeaway, who is taking the ask counsel for that clarification task?
I will, because I needed to follow up with Gwen anyway regarding some training that I need to plan.
Okay.
And just Stephanie, anybody who would any assistant principal that we would have in the future would already have this training?
I make sure that they get the training. So when we hire a new administrator, there are so many different things that they need to get training on. So there's the sort of the basic sexual harassment training that's required of any new administrator. Then there's the Title IX training, as well as, of course, our evaluation tool, among a number of things. So, but there are, yes. So anytime there's a new hire, we take care of finding
So
them.
it wouldn't change if we switched personnel. That was my only.
No, part of the onboarding is signing them up for a whole lot of training.
Yay.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Thank you. I think that takes us to item D, unless there's additional discussion on C. Okay, so social media policy. So I've been asked that we bring this to the policy committee and discuss. I know that we have, and specifically we're talking about social media policy related to employees. I think we have looked at and sort of sought guidance from our attorneys at Shipman. There are significant concerns about First Amendment, specifically politically protected speech. And in the specific circumstances that have recently been very public and widely discussed, we've had advice that this is clearly protected political speech. So one of the things that that I think is worth discussing is, first, whether or not we want to create a policy here at all. I could land in both camps. I think the policy, if it exists, I think it needs to be very clear about the sort of free speech rights and sort of articulating sort of in line with hey, no hate speech, hey, no inciting violence, also very clearly articulating the parts that are protected speech. The part that I worry about is not our boards with sort of our contribution to the conversation, but future boards looking at a policy that exists, pointing to it as a way to say, now we can discipline, now we can punish someone who said something that either we don't like or we thought was imprudent, that is protected speech, that those boards go down the path of disciplining or perhaps even removing an employee, and that creates significant liability from a legal standpoint. So I'm concerned that if we do develop a policy on this, that policy has to be crystal clear about a fairly narrow set of circumstances in which that policy would be used, to discipline or remove an employee. So that's my 2 cents on that. Any other sort of thoughts on the topic?
I tend to agree that if you're going to dip your toe into the waters of a social media policy that on its face limits the free speech of employees, you have to be very careful in how you do that. I know that if you do it wrong, you're going to attract all kinds of attention that you don't want. And to your point, even well-intentioned board members can look at a facially neutral policy and apply it incorrectly in a way that triggers liability.
Right.
Because as a practical matter, it is unlawful in the state of Connecticut to retaliate for the exercise of free speech by an employee. And an adverse employment action isn't just you're fired. It's I gave you a bad review. I put something negative in your evaluation, because evaluations of superintendents are public documents in the state of Connecticut. And so what you don't want is board member Smith said that the superintendent really shouldn't have, gone to Hartford and testified about that bill about fill in the blank. I really didn't like that. That would be an adverse employment action, and that would be problematic. And so that's where I get uncomfortable in a world where we have 21 board members who do not have any formal onboarding or training in this area or in any areas, making off-the-cuff determinations based on how one's free speech makes them feel. That troubles me. Yeah. And so if we're going, I don't think there's a per se problem with having a policy. I just think we have to do it in a very deliberate fashion that is not reactionary, but is with intent to provide appropriate guardrails, and that comes with an intention to make sure that everybody understands what the policy does and what it does not do.
Yep. I think that would be valuable. I actually think even if we didn't adopt a policy, sort of some kind of educational materials to board members about that subject would be useful. And it brings us back to the topic of board member onboarding and the general lack of a process, that exists.
It underscores the sort of scary reality, which is that board members have a lot of inherent authority through their position that they can wield unintentionally in ways that are damaging.
Okay. Any additional discussion on? So I think what may make sense is for us to look for additional language that would help us to understand sort of protected speech and sort of all of those things. I don't know where the boards are at right now. Individual boards are at with an appetite for this policy. I know there have been some calls from the public and some calls from some board members, but I don't know if we have a sort of a majority of board members who are interested in defining a policy here.
I mean, maybe what makes sense is for us as a committee to take a look at the shipment model policy, have a discussion about our comfort level with it, make whatever modifications make us feel comfortable, and then float that back in the March cycle, not as a recommendation to our boards, but if this is the direction it's going, do you want us to keep working on this? Or is this already just a non-starter? Because we shouldn't spend 20 hours making something perfect if the boards have no appetite to have the conversation at all. But if we at least bring them a framework, it says, this is the area in which we can play. Do you want to be playing in this area?
Yep.
And if the reaction is, keep me away from that, then we can say, thank you. We've brought you what might work. You've said no, we're done.
I like that. That seems reasonable. Okay, good. So we'll have that on the agenda next week to review that policy and discuss. Very good. Anything else on this topic? All right, that takes us to public comment. Allison, you should be able to unmute. We're not hearing you. I'm sorry. If you are speaking, we're not hearing you.
Hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
There we go.
Thank you. A couple of things. Still, I definitely think we need a social media policy. I also think we need it for students. I think we should look outside at other states that are bordering us and see what they're doing. They have a lot of policies. Their unions have policies, etc. And I think it's a good policy to have. I understand it can be an issue on both sides, but I think there has to be some guidelines. I wonder, I put it in my note earlier, if a student wrote that something similar, or what would have happened. The second item is the Title IX. I also saw the recent Senate hearings, Connecticut Commissioner, and that whole exchange with Rand Paul. And I have a petite daughter. I don't know if this is a mandatory adoption of this policy. So I think that it would be, again, a discussion that would be good to get out into the public. So that's where I'll leave it with that. It's disheartening. I understand everybody's rights, and I support it. I don't agree with taking rights away from people, and that's where I'll leave it. Everybody has their rights, and I don't believe that we should take something away from one group to give it to somebody else. Everybody should have it. And that's where I'll leave it. I'm saddened. I'm saddened by a lot of things in public going on in the world, and I'm extremely saddened by the education or lack thereof that's going on in this district. And I'll actually read something to you. I'm a proponent of my daughter's education. She is on her education level, on grade level and above. I never claim her to be a genius, to be the smartest kid, to be perfect. In fact, I'm always asking other questions. Was it you? What did you do? What'd you say? That's how we were brought up, and that's how we bring up our daughter. However, I have tried endlessly to get her challenging work at her level. And I have not been successful. Yesterday, I spoke to an administrator who told me that the Easton district caters to those with emotional needs and trauma, those that have executive function weaknesses, and that there are no funds and no staff to appropriately provide work to a wide range of abilities. As a parent, as a taxpayer, as somebody who came to this town for the schools, I am embarrassed that I've bought a house here, and I will sell, I guess, at a loss to provide my daughter with the education she deserves elsewhere. I have tried every avenue. I don't know what else to do. And I'll leave it at that. If anybody wants to reach out to me, please do so. I have ideas, I speak up, I attend these meetings, I pay my taxes, I work full-time, and so does my husband, and I'm trying to do the right thing, giving my daughter all the opportunity she deserves. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Board member or committee member comment?
I would just thank my colleagues for a productive hour. We worked through a lot of different areas, and I think it was very productive and moving us forward. Also, I would just clarify that the Title IX policy we discussed is to adopt Trump Department of Education regulations, which are required by law, and we're not breaking any new ground in these regulations. And also note that freedom of speech in employment law is stronger in Connecticut than possibly anywhere else in the United States of America. Connecticut General Statute 31-51Q provides very broad protections for speech related to employees. And so while other states might be able to impose certain limitations on social media, such limitations would not be permissible in the state of Connecticut.
Thank you. Any additional committee member comment? All right. Look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Gwen.
Second.
Thank you, Chris. All in favor? Very good. We are adjourned at 10:03. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks.